What is up, Felix here, and in the last few days I finally managed to check out the Digitakt II, and I built some patterns to check out the new features, and afterwards I'm also going to tell you whether or not it's going to be replacing my Octatrack, so stick around for that. But now let's go. Alright, here we go with the Digitakt II, and let's first maybe have a listen. And I already did some things here that I couldn't do on the Digitakt I. We're going to get into it in a bit. But first of all, you have to say, obviously, it's almost identical to the Digitakt I. The main differences is that instead of the usual 4-bar pattern limit, you now actually have 8 bars or 128 steps, so double the pattern length. Another thing is, of course, the storage. As you can see here, it's been vastly expanded, so you can load lots more samples. And maybe the biggest difference is now the support of stereo samples, yeah? So before the Digitakt, it was already stereo, but you could only work with mono samples. So if you used stereo samples, they were converted into mono, and then the only thing that made it stereo were effects, like panning, delay, reverb, chorus, and all that kind of stuff. So you could get stereo sound out of it, but now you can actually get stereo sound into it in the first place, which is of course a big upgrade. That's going to be the main selling point for many people. But now let me walk you a little bit through what I did here for this pattern. Yeah, here we have this classic 90s kind of drum loop. And here, of course, I only have a pattern length of 1 bar, yeah, because otherwise it would be tedious to manage 8 patterns. Because of course you can adjust the pattern duration for each individual track. Yeah, if I now go to the next track, you can see the pattern is actually going to be 4 bars. And what I did here, the rhythm of the note is always the same on all 4 patterns, but on some of them I parameter locked the pitch to the individual steps. Yeah, so here it's a C5 being played, here it's an A4 being played, here an A sharp 4, and then this is how I get the melody into the pattern. Next sound. Yeah, this is sort of like a one-shot sample here being utilized just to support the clap and give it a bit more character. And here I actually have a 4-bar pattern length because there's this little variation at the end. Same goes for the next track, which is just another very tiny clap layered in. You have a little clap sound. And another way you can sequence this, besides from actually putting in the steps, you could of course just play it like this. Now you have it in here, and you can also quantize it, but you cannot just quantize it to 100% so that it's perfectly on the steps. But you could also quantize it only to a certain percentage. Yeah, this way it's not completely fucked, but it's still a bit more humane than just programming it perfectly on the step. Here another hi-hat. And here I'm actually making use of the slicing feature because it's a bit longer sample in here, and I just wanted to use this tambourine. So I put it here into the grid mode, because as you can see, there's 5 different machines now on the Digitakt II as opposed to 4 different machines on the Digitakt I. What is a machine? A machine is basically a sampler, software, algorithm, whatever. Yeah, so this is different software that allows you to handle the audio samples in a different way. One-shot is specialized for one-shot samples, warp is specialized for warping, stretch is specialized for time stretching, repitching obviously, and lastly grid, which is basically a slicer. Yeah, so you load, for example, a breakbeat sample into it, like I did here. It's also another house loop or whatever, But yeah, it's a longer sample than just a one-shot sample, so it might be a good idea to slice it. If you open it in slice mode and then press the keyboard, you can actually play these different slices here with the nodes, and you could also perform it into it like this, or you could just parameter lock the number of the slice you want into the sequencer. And of course, this is a big upgrade compared to just being able to do one-shot sampling, but it's still much more limited than on the Octatrack, where you can much more precisely control the start and end point of these slices, and you have a better visualization and overall more detailed workflow, which is more specialized for this kind of stuff. Lastly here, these two sounds, 8 and 9. As you can see, this is my only pattern that's actually longer than 4 bars, because on the first step, I have a shorter envelope on this sample, so it gets quieter much faster. And then on the 5th bar, I actually did some parameter locks for the actual release time of the sound. So if you now listen to the entire pattern, you will notice that here only one part of the vocal is played, and here both parts of the vocal are played. And then lastly, here on the 9, this little effect sound. So now I actually maxed out the previous limit of 8 sounds, and now I'm actually using 9 sounds. And as you can see, there's a bit of modulation going on this sound, yeah? As I mentioned, you have 3 LFOs now per track. I think before it were just 2. And I'm actually only using 1 LFO here right now, but gives you an idea of the possibilities. Yeah, you can choose any parameter on any sound and apply this modulation. In this case, it's a sine wave LFO, which is not so fast, and it's assigned to the panning. So the sound is going to go from left to right, which is going to sound like this. And to make it a bit more spacious, I'm going to use the reverb. And now the space is going to be much larger. So to conclude, what are the big changes compared to Digitakt I? The increased storage space, the increased pattern length, the increased number of modulation sources, and the ability to actually import proper stereo samples in the first place. Alright, but now you still ask yourself whether or not I'm gonna exchange my Octatrack for a Digitakt, and I think the answer is no, because there's still a bunch of features that are really important to me, like being able to slice samples much more precisely and really determine the exact start and end point of each slice. Also, I think for controlling other gear with MIDI, it feels still a bit more intuitive and powerful, especially in a performance context, utilizing the slider and all that kind of stuff. So I think for me personally, I'm going to stick around for an eventual Octatrack 3 in case that ever happens. But I think for many people, it's still going to be a good option to go with the Digitakt because, for example, the sound quality I think is vastly superior to the Octatrack. Whenever you load audio into the Octatrack, it already loses a lot of its fidelity for whatever reason. And the Digitakt just sounds objectively superior, but that was already true for the Digitakt I as well. But had I to choose between Digitakt I and 2, I think I would still go for Digitakt II due to stereo sampling, the longer patterns and the bigger memory. But depending on what you're using it for, a second-hand Digitakt I should also do the job. Alright, I guess that's it from my side for today. In case of any questions, as usual, let me know and I'm trying to get back to you ASAP. And apart from that, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Peace out.